I didn't expect my life to change the night I agreed to share my apartment. It was just a simple decision, a practical one, really. But that night, as I stood in the doorway watching him unpack his things, I felt an inexplicable shift in the air, a tension that hinted at secrets lurking just beneath the surface. That my name is Alex, and for the longest time, I felt like a ghost in my own world, wandering through the days, invisible to everyone around me. I had always been the quiet one, the observer rather than the participant. The weight of my anxiety clung to me like a heavy cloak, stifling my spirit. I was searching for something, someone, to help me break free from that solitude. The apartment we shared was a modest two-bedroom in a bustling part of the city. The walls were adorned with mismatched art pieces from local artists, and the faint smell of coffee always lingered in the air. It felt like home, but it also felt like a cage at times. I had decorated it with remnants of my life. Books piled high on every surface, plants that struggled for sunlight, and framed photographs of friends who had drifted away over time. Then there was Ethan. He was everything I wasn't: confident, charismatic, and effortlessly charming. We met at a mutual friend's party where he lit up the room with his laughter. When he asked if I needed a roommate, it felt like fate intervening. Little did I know that beneath his charming exterior lay secrets that would unravel everything. That as we settled into our new living arrangement, Ethan quickly became a fixture in my daily life. Our evenings were filled with laughter and shared meals. He introduced me to new music while I showed him my favorite movies. One night, while cooking dinner together, our hands brushed against each other as we reached for the same spice jar. The moment lingered longer than it should have. Electricity crackled between us. "Do you think we're more than just roommates?" I asked hesitantly one evening as we sat on the couch. Ethan smirked but didn't answer directly. Instead, he changed the subject to his upcoming art show, a passion project he had been working on for months. It was moments like these that made me feel alive again. Yet they were tinged with an underlying tension that I couldn't quite place. That as weeks turned into months, Ethan's presence became both comforting and confusing. He opened up about his dreams and aspirations, but always skirted around his past. I sensed something deeper lurking beneath his surface, a shadow that darkened our otherwise bright interactions. One evening, while scrolling through social media together, I stumbled upon an article featuring him. His art showcased in an upscale gallery with whispers of his wealthy family background. My heart sank as feelings of betrayal washed over me. Why hadn't he told me? "Ethan, why didn't you say anything?" I felt anger bubbling beneath my skin. That he sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair as if trying to tame the chaos within him. I wanted to keep that part of my life separate from us. "But why? We're friends." My voice wavered with frustration. "I didn't want you to see me differently," he replied earnestly. The air thickened with unspoken words as misunderstandings began to pile up between us, each conversation tinged with unresolved feelings and unaddressed fears. That night, as we sat on the couch, sharing stories and laughter, I caught a glimpse of something in Ethan's eyes, a flicker of fear or perhaps regret. It left me unsettled, wondering what lay beneath his charming facade. Little did I know that soon enough, those secrets would come crashing into our lives like a tidal wave. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Ethan and me began to grow, much like a storm brewing on the horizon. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something significant about his life, something that cast a shadow over our burgeoning friendship. Each time I tried to bring it up, he would deflect, changing the subject or offering a half-hearted smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. One evening, we were curled up on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating our faces as we watched a documentary about wealth and privilege. The narrator spoke about families who wielded power and influence, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. It was then that I noticed Ethan's expression shift. He seemed distant, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That he nodded but didn't meet my gaze. "Yeah, just thinking about things." I wanted to press him further, to peel back the layers of his guarded exterior, but something held me back. Instead, I focused on the screen, trying to distract myself from the nagging feeling that there was more to Ethan than he was letting on. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the images from the documentary out of my mind. The opulence they depicted felt so far removed from my own life. My modest apartment filled with secondhand furniture and thrift store finds. I had always been content with simplicity, but knowing that Ethan came from a world of affluence made me question everything. The next day, while scrolling through social media during my lunch break at work, I stumbled upon an article featuring Ethan's artwork. My heart sank as I read about his family's legacy, a prominent lineage intertwined with wealth and status. The headline boasted about his upcoming exhibition at a prestigious gallery downtown. My mind raced with questions. Why hadn't he told me? Did he think I would judge him for it? That evening, when Ethan returned home, I confronted him. I saw the article about your art show, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, that he froze for a moment before turning to face me. Oh yeah? Why didn't you mention it? You're going to be showing your work in a fancy gallery. That's amazing. My excitement was laced with frustration. It's not that big of a deal, he replied dismissively. Not that big of a deal? Ethan, this is huge. Why do you keep your past in? He sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture that had become all too familiar. Some things are better left buried, he said softly. His words hung in the air between us like an uninvited guest. I felt anger bubbling beneath my skin, but also a deep sense of concern for him. There was so much more to him than what he was willing to share. Days passed after our confrontation without any resolution. The air between us grew thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Every time we shared a meal or watched a movie together, there was an invisible barrier separating us. A wall built from secrets and misunderstandings. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself wandering through our apartment. The silence felt oppressive as I moved from room to room, searching for answers in shadows that seemed to mock me. In the living room, I caught sight of Ethan's sketchbook lying open on the coffee table. Curiosity got the better of me as I approached it. Flipping through the pages filled with intricate drawings and raw emotions, I felt like I was peering into his soul, each stroke of the pencil revealing pieces of him he hadn't shared aloud. There were sketches of landscapes that seemed familiar yet distant, portraits of people whose expressions captured moments of joy and sorrow alike. But one drawing stopped me cold, a dark figure standing alone under an ominous sky. It resonated with an unsettling familiarity. It felt like a reflection of Ethan himself, isolated and burdened by something unseen. Just then, I heard the front door open and close softly behind me. My heart raced as Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes widening when he saw me holding his sketchbook. I'm sorry, I stammered, quickly closing it as if caught in an act of betrayal. Ethan approached slowly, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have looked at that. I just wanted to understand you better. I replied defensively that he sighed deeply and took a seat beside me on the couch. There are parts of my life that are complicated, parts that are hard to explain. Then help me understand, I urged gently. I care about you. For a moment, silence enveloped us like a heavy blanket. Finally, he spoke up. It's not just about my past. It's about who I am now and who I want to be. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between vulnerability and self-protection raging within him. In that moment, all I wanted was for him to let me in. But instead of opening up further, he stood abruptly and walked toward his bedroom without another word. The door clicked shut behind him with finality, leaving me alone once again with my thoughts, a mix of frustration and longing swirling inside me like a tempest. The days stretched on, each one feeling heavier than the last. Ethan and I moved through our routines like shadows, the warmth of our earlier connection overshadowed by an unspoken rift. I could feel the distance growing between us, a chasm filled with secrets and misunderstandings that neither of us seemed willing to bridge. My heart ached with confusion and frustration, and I found myself questioning everything about our relationship. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find Ethan sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. The room was dimly lit, and the flickering screen cast shadows across his face. I could tell he was lost in thought, his brow furrowed, as if he were wrestling with something deep inside. Hey, I said softly, hoping to break through his silence. "How was your day?" He shrugged without looking at me. "It was fine." I felt a familiar pang of disappointment. "Just fine?" "Yeah," he replied curtly that I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. "Ethan, we need to talk." He finally turned to face me, his expression guarded. "About what?" "About us. About everything that's been going on." My voice trembled slightly as I spoke, but I pressed on. "I feel like there's this wall between us, and it's killing me." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to be honest with me," I urged. "You've been distant ever since I found out about your art show. Why won't you let me in?" He ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture that had become all too familiar, and sighed deeply. "It's complicated, Alex. You don't understand." "Then help me understand," he pleaded, frustration bubbling over. "I care about you, but you're pushing me away." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished behind a mask of defiance. "I can't just dump my problems on you," he said sharply. "Why not? We're supposed to be in this together." My heart raced as I felt the weight of my emotions spilling out into the open. Ethan stood abruptly and paced across the room, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "You don't know what it's like for me. The expectations, the pressure. It's suffocating." "What expectations?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. He stopped mid-pace and turned to face me again, his expression shifting from anger to something softer. "Fear, perhaps. My family, they have this image of who I'm supposed to be. An artist from a wealthy family who follows in their footsteps. If they knew about my struggles, if they knew about you." His voice trailed off as if he couldn't bear to finish the thought. "About me?" I echoed softly. "Yes. You're not part of their world," he said bitterly. "They wouldn't understand us." The realization hit me like a cold wave. Ethan was afraid of losing me not just because of his past, but because of who he believed he had to be in order to fit into his family's expectations. It was all starting to make sense. The weight he carried was far heavier than I had imagined. "Ethan," I said gently, stepping closer to him, "I'm not asking you to abandon your dreams or your family. But you don't have to hide from me. You can be yourself with me." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a brief moment, the walls began to crumble between us. But just as quickly as that moment came, it faded away again as he turned away from me. "I need time," he said quietly. "Time?" My heart sank at his words. "Yes," he replied firmly but without malice. "I need time to figure things out." With that, he retreated into his bedroom and closed the door behind him with a soft click that echoed through the silence of our apartment. An unmistakable finality that left me standing alone in the living room, that I felt tears prick at my eyes as frustration and sadness washed over me like a tide pulling away from shore. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on my chest. It felt like we were standing on opposite sides of an impenetrable barrier that neither of us knew how to break through. That night was long and restless. Sleep eluded me as thoughts swirled in my mind. Memories of our laughter together mingled with fears of losing him forever. Each tick of the clock echoed loudly in the stillness of the apartment, reminding me of how quickly time was slipping away. In the early hours of dawn, when the first light began to filter through the curtains, I made a decision. I couldn't wait for Ethan to come around any longer. If he needed time to figure things out alone, then maybe it was time for me to take charge of my own life too. Time for me to confront my own fears and insecurities without him. As the sun rose outside our window, casting golden rays across my cluttered room, I felt a flicker of determination ignite within me, a resolve to reclaim my own happiness regardless of what lay ahead for us. The days after our heart-to-heart felt like a fragile truce, a delicate balance between hope and uncertainty. Ethan and I had opened up to each other, but the weight of his family's expectations still loomed over us like a dark cloud. I could see the internal struggle etched on his face, especially when he received calls from his parents or when he was reminded of the upcoming art show. Each time his phone buzzed, I felt a ripple of tension pass between us. One evening, while Ethan was in the shower, I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of him and the challenges he faced. I wanted to support him, but I also felt helpless. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to understand what was really going on in his life, what secrets he was still holding back. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, steam swirling around him, I decided to take a leap of faith. "Can we talk?" I asked, my heart pounding. He looked at me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Sure. What's on your mind?" I gestured for him to sit down on the couch. "I've been thinking about your family and everything you've shared with me, but I feel like there's still so much you're not telling me." Ethan sighed heavily and ran a hand through his damp hair. "It's just complicated, Alex. My family, they have this image of who I'm supposed to be." "What do you mean?" I pressed gently, that he hesitated, searching for the right words. "They expect me to follow in their footsteps, become part of their world. My father is a well-known gallery owner, and my mother is an art critic. They want me to be successful in their eyes." "And what does success look like for you?" I asked softly, that he looked away, his expression clouded with frustration. "I don't know anymore. All my life, I've tried to meet their expectations, but it feels like I'm losing myself in the process." "Ethan," I said, reaching out to take his hand in mine, "you don't have to live your life for them. You're an incredible artist with your own voice." He met my gaze then, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "But what if they disapprove? What if they turn their backs on me? Then they don't deserve you." I replied firmly. "You have to do what feels right for you, not for them." He nodded slowly but still seemed conflicted. "It's easier said than done." "I know," I said gently. "But you have me in your corner. You don't have to face this alone." As we sat there together, the weight of our conversation hung heavy in the air. Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the moment. He glanced at it and instantly tensed. "It's my mom," he said quietly. "Do you want to answer it?" I asked. That he hesitated, but then shook his head. "Not right now." "Okay," I said softly, squeezing his hand reassuringly. After a few moments of silence, Ethan stood up abruptly and began pacing again. "I just wish things were different," he admitted finally. "Different how?" "I wish my family could accept me for who I am instead of who they want me to be." He confessed, that I could see the pain etched across his features as he spoke. It was clear that this struggle had been weighing heavily on him for far too long. "You deserve that acceptance," I said earnestly. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face me again, his eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge my sincerity. "What if they find out about us?" My heart raced at the question. It was something we hadn't fully addressed yet. "If your family can't accept us, then maybe it's time for you to reconsider how much power they hold over your life." He looked away again, deep in thought as he processed my words. The tension in the room felt palpable as we both grappled with the reality of his situation. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Ethan finally spoke up again. "I need to go see them." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What? Why?" "I have to face them," he replied resolutely. "I can't keep running away from this." "But what if they don't understand?" My voice trembled slightly as fear gripped my heart. "I need to know where I stand with them," he said firmly. My stomach churned as I realized how serious he was about this decision. It was a turning point that could change everything between us, both good and bad. "Okay," I said finally, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "But promise me you'll be careful." "I will," he assured me softly before leaning down to kiss my forehead, a gesture that felt both comforting and bittersweet. As Ethan prepared for his visit home, anxiety gnawed at me like an unwelcome guest. Would this be the moment when everything fell apart? Or would it be a chance for him to reclaim his identity? The next day came too quickly. Ethan left early in the morning before I had even woken up fully. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, worry washed over me like a tidal wave. What would happen when he faced his family? Would they embrace him or push him further away? Hours passed slowly until finally evening arrived. The clock ticking down, each minute felt like an eternity until my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "I'm on my way home." My heart raced as anticipation mixed with anxiety. Would he return with answers or more questions? When he walked through the door later that night, his expression was unreadable. A mix of relief and uncertainty etched across his face. "How did it go?" I asked breathlessly as he stepped into the living room. Ethan took a deep breath before speaking, and in that moment, everything hung in balance, our future together teetering on the edge of uncertainty. The days that followed my confrontation with Ethan felt like an eternity. I focused on myself, pouring my energy into work and rediscovering the things that once brought me joy. I started painting again, letting the colors flow onto the canvas as a way to express the turmoil inside me. Each stroke was cathartic, a release of pent-up emotions that had been bottled up for too long. But despite my efforts to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in our apartment. The laughter we once shared felt like a distant memory, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung in the air. I missed him, his presence, his warmth, and even his chaotic energy. It was a strange paradox. While I was trying to reclaim my independence, I felt more alone than ever. One evening, as I sat on the couch working on a new painting, I heard the front door open. My heart raced as I looked up to see Ethan stepping inside, looking weary and worn. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze between us. "Hey," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. He walked over and sat down across from me, his gaze drifting to the canvas in front of me. "You've been painting again," he observed. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "It helps." Ethan nodded but didn't say anything else. The silence stretched between us like an unbridgeable chasm, filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I could see the weight of his own struggles etched on his face, and it tugged at my heart. "Do you want to talk?" I asked finally, breaking the tension that had settled over us. That he hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly. "I think we need to." As we began to talk, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Ethan opened up about the pressure he felt from his family, the expectations that loomed over him like a dark cloud. He spoke of his art show and how it had become a battleground between who he was and who everyone wanted him to be. "I've always felt like I'm living in two worlds," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "There's the world where I'm Ethan, the artist who wants to create freely, and then there's the world where I'm just their son. I can't imagine how hard that must be," I said softly, my heart aching for him. "But you don't have to face this alone." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes, a flicker of hope that maybe we could navigate this together. "I've been so scared," he confessed. "Scared of losing you if you knew everything about me, about my family, and what they expect from me. You won't lose me because of your past," I assured him gently. "We all have things we're not proud of or that we struggle with. But it's those things that make us who we are." Ethan nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes as he absorbed my words. "I just don't want you to regret being with me." "I won't regret it," I replied firmly. "But you have to let me in. We can't build something real if you keep pushing me away." He took a deep breath, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of the world was lifting off his shoulders. "You're right," he said quietly. "I need to be honest with you, not just about my family, but about myself." In that moment of shared vulnerability, something shifted between us. A fragile, yet powerful connection forged through honesty and understanding. We talked long into the night, unraveling layers of fear and doubt that had kept us apart for so long. That as dawn broke outside our window, casting soft light across our faces, Ethan reached out and took my hand in his, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about our renewed commitment to one another. "I want to fight for us," he said earnestly. "Me too," I replied with a smile that felt genuine for the first time in ages. With each word spoken and each secret shared, we began to rebuild what had been, fractured between us, brick by brick, until it felt like we were standing on solid ground once again. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room as I woke up to the sound of laughter. I blinked in surprise, realizing it was coming from the kitchen. Ethan was up, and the smell of coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the scent of something sweet baking in the oven. My heart swelled with a sense of warmth and hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. That I got out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, where I found Ethan humming to himself as he whisked batter in a bowl. He looked up and smiled at me, his eyes sparkling with a lightness that made my heart flutter. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he said cheerfully. "I thought I'd surprise you with pancakes." "Pancakes?" I echoed, grinning. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied, his smile widening. "After everything we talked about last night, I thought we could start fresh today." I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my head against his back. "This feels nice," I murmured, soaking in the moment that as we enjoyed breakfast together, the atmosphere felt different, lighter, and filled with possibilities. We talked about our plans for the day, sharing dreams and aspirations that had been buried under layers of fear for far too long. It felt like we were finally on the same page, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The sun shone brightly overhead as we strolled hand in hand along the winding paths lined with blooming flowers. The world around us seemed vibrant and alive, reflecting the newfound energy between us. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as we walked, his expression serious yet hopeful. "I want to have my art show at a community center instead of a fancy gallery." I stopped walking and turned to face him, surprised by his words. "Really? Why?" "Because I want my art to connect with people who can relate to it, not just those who appreciate it because of my family's name," he explained passionately. "I want to create a space where everyone feels welcome, where they can see themselves in my work." A smile spread across my face as I listened to him speak. "That sounds incredible. You'll be able to share your story in a way that resonates with others." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "And I want you by my side through all of it." My heart swelled at his words. "Of course, we're in this together." As we continued our walk, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for how far we had come. The shadows of doubt that had once loomed over us were dissipating like mist under the morning sun. Later that afternoon, we returned home and spent hours brainstorming ideas for Ethan's art show. Everything from themes to invitations. We laughed and debated passionately, our creative energies intertwining as we envisioned a future filled with possibilities. As evening approached, Ethan suggested we celebrate our progress with dinner at our favorite restaurant. The thought of sharing a meal together felt like a small victory, a chance to reconnect over something simple yet meaningful at the restaurant. We shared stories and dreams over delicious food, our laughter echoing through the cozy space. It felt good to be together again. No barriers between us, just two people who had chosen to embrace their vulnerabilities. After dinner, we took a stroll along the waterfront, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beauty of the moment wrapped around us like a warm embrace. "I'm so glad we're doing this," Ethan said softly as he stopped to gaze out at the water. "Me too," I replied, leaning against him. "I feel like we're finally on the right path." He turned to me then, his expression serious yet tender. "I promise to always be honest with you from now on. No more secrets. And I promise to support you no matter what." I added earnestly, in that moment. Everything felt possible. Our dreams intertwined like threads in a tapestry, waiting to be woven into something beautiful. As we stood there together under the fading light of day, I realized that love was not just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about facing life's challenges hand in hand and growing stronger together through every trial. With renewed hope for our future and hearts full of promise, we walked back home side by side, ready to face whatever came next together.